Hi, my name is Viola, and I've been interviewing my dad about his 1997 Everest expedition. We went with some famous climbers like Ed Viesturs and David Brashears, and they actually filmed a documentary for Nova called Everest the Death Zone while they were there. I'm a naturally curious person, and even though it's 30 years later, I wanted to ask him about his climb and share those stories with all you. So I created this series called My Dad Climbed Everest and I Have Questions. This series was originally made for TikTok, hence the reason it's formatted the way it is. So it's kind of like TikTok compilations. So if you want to see the original videos on TikTok, you can go check it out. That is linked in my bio. In this compilation, he's telling us how much it cost for him to climb Mount Everest in 1997 and how he was able to take 3 months off of work to go climb Everest. Then he goes into how he was originally supposed to climb Mount Everest in 1996, and fortunately he did not, but 1996 was the year that led to Jon Krakauer's Into Thin Air. And then he talks about how it felt to hear that news about that Everest disaster that is so famous. He talks about the controversy surrounding Into Thin Air and what he thinks about all that. And then lastly, he gives us a few book recommendations that you might like if you like Into Thin Air and any other books related to Everest. So, hope you enjoy.
Well, I went to Everest twice. The first time in 1991, it didn't cost me anything. The whole trip was paid for. I was going as a guide. Back then, most of the climbs on Everest, everybody was sponsored by somebody, and that was 1991. But 97, I paid approximately out of my pocket, total, all expenses, plane tickets, equipment. I think it was around, I calculated it out, lost work time is around $40,000. But after I summited and I came back with after the Nova show played, I did quite a few talks and we called them slideshows back then. And I would always do slideshows for like Boy Scout groups or something. And I never charged anything for those. But if I did a slideshow for somebody's business or some for-profit entity, I always charged around $2,000 to $3,000, and I calculated I basically probably made I paid for the Everest climb, but I also made a profit on it. How did I basically take the 3 months off from work, and how did the discussion go with my boss? My boss at the time happened to be my dad. And we had a family lumber company in Indianapolis that I was working at. So it was a pretty easy conversation. And I had been guiding on Rainier for a number of years during the summer months. When I was working full-time in Indianapolis, I'd go out to Rainier, usually early May, and then come back September or October to Indianapolis after the climbing season on Rainier and Denali kind of ended. I'd come back to Indianapolis. So originally I was going to probably go on the 1996 expedition with Rob Hall. I was going down that path, and at the last minute, I decided I had bad vibes about it, and I also was very busy at work. We were building a new office in Indianapolis at our lumber company, which was not completed on time. And I thought it would be done by then, but it wasn't, so I canceled. But I also didn't feel good about that climb. And it wasn't the right time for me. I could just tell. I followed my gut on almost all decisions in my life. And my gut kept on telling me, don't go, don't go. And so I didn't go. What was my reaction to the 96 disaster, knowing that I was thinking about going on that expedition? I had been toying with the idea of going with adventure consultants in the 96 climb. It just wasn't going to work out from a work standpoint. And so I like that. I like to say I'm one of the luckiest guys in the world in many ways. That was one thing that I look back on today, in that having that office building construction go over the allotted time to complete that project, might have not saved my life, but made a big difference in my climbing experience on Everest. And the other thing is, I was also thinking about going in 1995 with Rob Hall and Adventure Consultants, and Ed Viesters was on that climb, and I had told Rob I'd go on that climb in 1995, committed to it, and I had really bad feelings about it after I made the commitment. Just didn't feel right from my gut standpoint. And I called Rob, or faxed Rob back. We faxed back and forth back in the day. We didn't have the internet. Faxed Rob and said, "Hey man, I just can't make it happen. I just don't feel good about that going, leaving." And I didn't want to tell him I didn't feel good about it. But that climb in 1995 for Adventure Consultants, they got in a whiteout very close to the south summit of Everest, and they had to turn around, and nobody summited then, and one of the ladies on that climb had collapsed, had to drag her off the summit ridge in 1995. And so there's two experiences, two times there that fate kind of played its hand for me. My reaction to the 96 disaster was one of shock. I was really bummed out for everybody involved, but it was also an eye-opener for me. Just, once again, a reminder just how dangerous climbing these big 8,000 meter peaks can be. Back in 1996 and 95, we didn't have the modern weather forecasting that we have now with these satellites that are available for climbers and everything. They can tell you what the wind speed is going to be at 8,000 meters. They can tell you when the clouds are going to come in exactly. We didn't have all that information in 1991 when I was there. And also it wasn't as refined in 95 and 96 and 97. The 96 disaster, how did it kind of influence my decision to go in 1997? Well, the 1997 decision was pretty simple for me. Everything had lined up perfectly for 1997 for me to go to Everest, especially my work commitments here in Indianapolis. Timing was right. Physically and mentally, my body was ready to go. And so it just felt good. I didn't really delve into the 96 disaster when I made that 97 decision to go to Everest. So it just was a perfect fit. The team it felt right. The team was very strong with Ed Viesters and Guy Cotter and Pete Athens and Veka Guffinson. And those guys were, and David Brashears, and those guys were the best of the best. And I was extremely lucky to be on that 97 climb with those guys. And I was also intimidated to be with those guys. I just never wanted to make a mistake. I was climbing with people that I had a lot of respect. They were kind of my mentors. And I just kind of was overwhelmed to be with those guys. I was the low man on the totem pole, so to speak. I think Into Thin Air is very accurate. And I also think The Climb by Anatoly Bukharev is accurate. You have two separate people that were on the mountain at the same time in a highly stressful situation at altitude, and they observed the same thing, but they might have seen different things. So I think both stories are accurate. I think Anatoly Bukharev was Russian. He died a few years after the 96 disaster on Annapurna in the winter, on a winter ascent. The Climb is his book about the 96 disaster. I recommend that. But also Jon Krakauer's book, Into Thin Air, is a wonderful book. It's a good read. Krakauer stands behind his story, and I know Anatoly stood behind his story. And quite frankly, I think both of them were right, probably. I mean, I wasn't there. I'm just looking at those stories and what those authors observed and absorbed, and the highly stressful situation they were in. And people see things differently. And I probably, on the 97 climb, when I was having my issue of not able to breathe at Camp 3 and coming down from Camp 4, what I observed and what Ed probably observed were a little bit different too. I don't want to go into personalities or anything. And I think, once again, when you're in these on these expeditions, you're in close quarters with people, in tents, and you're eating and eating with them. You're going to the bathroom out there with them. You're sleeping in tents with them. Different personalities. People get irritated very easily up there. Also, in stressful situations, people's positive aspect of the personality and their negative aspect of the personality are highly magnified up there. Like I said, I think both books are accurate in their own way and probably how they portray people. Well, there's so many books about Everest out there. I have two favorites. Everybody's read Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. That's a wonderful book. The Climb by Anatoly Bokarev is another wonderful book. My favorite books are The Boldest Dream. It's about the 1976 American Everest expedition, where 12 climbers had a climb on Everest in 1976, and a few of them summited. It's great story. And then the other book, which I like and a lot of people have read, is called Seven Summits by Dick Bass and Rick Ridgway. And both these books, by the way, are by Rick Ridgway. Seven Summits is the story about Dick Bass and Frank Wells and their quest to climb the highest summit on the 7 continents. And it's a wonderful book. Both these books are easy reads.